the biggest appeal to Vegas is the nightlife and the pool parties. And I don't really know exactly what that's like or is going to be like moving into next year, moving forward with COVID.
Yeah.
And to tie it back to like New York, we're both native New Yorkers. We grew up here. It's been pretty sad seeing some of like the just the living conditions and mom and pop shops. Like my family, we have a coffee truck in the city. I made my first big boy investment in a food truck with my dad, and I haven't even been able to bring it out
Yeah.
yet. And it's just because there's no one. So a lot of my customers are office people,
Yeah.
and there's no one in offices now. So what kind of how you feel about living in New York nowadays? Is it a do you feel like it's a ghost town?
No, I
No, because I
don't.
don't
I don't
either.
think New York will ever be a ghost town,
I agree with that.
ever. I mean, even when you hear stories about people fleeing the city, there's still 8 million people
And I,
here.
I don't think that's actual New Yorkers. It's a
People
very
going back to like their hometowns, let's
exactly,
say.
yeah.
Or people who are New Yorkers and living in the city and they just want a bigger space and they're fed up with the city and they want to move out. I mean, there are people who are moving out like that too. But as far as like New York being a ghost town or New York being dead, like I don't think that. I think, and this is me being an optimist and being very positive, but I think when we do get over this, whenever that is, we're going to see a comeback to the city like we've never seen before.
Hmm.
Kind of, I was reading an article actually in the New York Post. They had interviewed a professor from Yale who was saying how it's going to be equivalent to like the Roaring Twenties, where people just like went crazy.
Ironically enough, it's the 20s now also. As
So,
we
yeah, I didn't even put two and two together. You're right. But that's what I think. And I think New York's always going to be a place that appeals to people. It's a place where you can come and do anything you want and be anyone you want and reinvent yourself, invent yourself, like network and, you know,
Well, that was the biggest appeal to New York because people will come into New York and I think the term is called transplant city, right? Or what's
it's when you're a transplant. Yeah,
transplant?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a city where you're right. There's always going to be the appeal to it, and a lot of creative people come here, and it's a go-getter town, right? It's a hustler's town, and I mean the hustlers like in the most positive way. Like I like to say that I'm a hustler with all
Yeah.
the stuff that I do, but I couldn't agree with you more about New York. And for those that are listening now, it's, like my business personally is down like 70% of what it used to be, and it's because there's no one around in the city. And you see boarded up windows on businesses or for rent signs and whatnot. But I think the biggest appeal to Manhattan and to the five boroughs has always been that you would put up with the bullshit of living in a one bedroom studio paying $1,000 a month, which might be a gift now if that was the case. But you do that because you're like, yo, you know what? F it, man. I'm down the block from all these bars and there's a nightlife and the train is there and I could be in Manhattan Midtown in 8 minutes because of my train.
Yeah.
Where now you don't have that. So that's where I think the big issue is between how
And
people
that's
feel
why
about it.
yes, and that's where I think people do have moved away because of that. Because let's say you're living in a studio apartment and you're paying, let's say it's $1,800 rent, or $2,000 because you're in, Midtown or wherever you are, where the rent is high. You're paying that exactly like you said because of your accessibility to everything, to cultural institutions, to other people, to just all of New York has to offer. And now without that, what's the point of paying all this money for an apartment where you're not able to utilize what's around you? Where you can move to another state, pay half that rent or pay a portion of it and
Have
have a
a
bigger
house.
space, have a
Yeah.
house, or use that and have a mortgage and you're basically paying off a house, let's say. I mean, there are so many things you can, talk about when it comes to why people are leaving New York. But personally, as a native New Yorker, I could never live anywhere else.
Really?
I've considered it for work, mostly just for work. But I don't think I could ever live anywhere else.
Wow.
Yeah.
They say about 70% of people never leave their home state.
Yeah.
And I think it's very true. I show so much love to people that I had a friend of mine. She lives in Miami now. I went to high school with her, and she they just had a, I think it's the Miami Herald. I saw she posted the article, but she got recognized as like one of the top real estate agents down there, and she's 27, I think. She just woke up one morning. She's like, dude, fuck snow. I'm not shoveling.
Yeah.
And she just got up and left and went down to Miami. Miami's probably my favorite city.
Yeah, I love Miami.
Miami's amazing. I mean, just if you think I like Vegas, Miami's probably my
Yeah.
favorite.
I mean,
And
maybe I would move to go somewhere warmer.
well, that's the
eventually.
thing. Like for us, it's always cold.
Yeah.
You know, the winters are pretty harsh
But
here.
that would be the only like maybe reason I would leave.
Yeah.
Unless my family also was like, we're getting out of here.
Right. Yeah, that
Which is
makes
also
sense
another
there.
thing that ties me to New York.
Right. Yeah, your family's here, and
Mm-hmm.
also there's your infrastructure. Like you're familiar with your people. It's not
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. It's not a bad thing that people stay in their home state. I mean, I haven't gone anywhere. Even when I went to college, I went to Buffalo, so
Yeah.
I'm still in New York. But I think I personally, so I always wanted to live somewhere else, but I never, I walked out of my college class and my Greek professor was like, "Where are you going?" I was like, "I'm out." She's like, "To where?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm just not coming back." And I went straight to the dean's office and I just withdrew my semester, and that was it, And I never knew until I stumbled into this thing that I can make money to survive, to live anywhere else. Because like I can't go to a job unless it's a labor job. Like I could be a plumber or some shit, go and learn a skill of some kind of trade, I should say. But everywhere else, it's like you need to have your degree, you need to be educated, you need to go to school, unless you create something like this. So I feel really different where I would love to live somewhere else. Even before this, like I'm not one of those like, oh my God, all dramatic and shit. Like, nah, man, New York is where it's at. I mean, I got this thing done because he's one of my favorite rappers, and the Trade Center is there also. So it's like, I'm always going to be a New Yorker. And I moved back into the city when people were moving out of it. I kind of doubled down on everything that I'm doing with this, but that's how I feel about like living in New York.